You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Finish training for the day? Time to fight post-workout fatigue with Core Power Protein Shakes. They're packed with 26 grams of high-quality protein to build muscle and electrolytes to help hydrate. The nutrition you need to help your body replenish, rebuild, and repair post-workout so you can power on to the next one. Champion your recovery with Core Power. Visit corepower.com to learn more.
About 67% of the time, the party opposite the White House wins the New Jersey election. 33% of the time, the same party who has the White House wins the New Jersey election. If you live in New Jersey and you're not getting something for nothing, you're not getting your fair share. Governor Brendan Byrne. New Jersey gubernatorial elections, that is, elections for governor, over the course of its history from the 19th century to the present even, have this similar dynamic, a little less than it used to be, urban versus suburban and rural. Particularly if you're going to go from the mid-19th century to the later part of the 20th century, the dynamic is always seems to involve Jersey City. In fact, just in the recent election for governor, we had a Jersey City mayor that ran in the primary. And Jersey City and the county that it's in, Hudson County, for a long period was seen as a center of machine politics. It still has some of that legacy today. Even today, as in places like Jersey City or Hoboken, these are very vibrant communities with lots of people having sometimes moved in from the suburbs or other places and bringing a different kind of civic ethic to things. But they're still seen as a little bit of a machine organization place. I had once lived in the town Hoboken, which anyone in the New York area is going to know continues to be a very popular place to live. Pretty high rents too. Not so much when I was there back in the 90s. And I had just moved in with a bunch of friends. Shout out to Jim Kelly, friend of the show. We had just lived there for maybe a year, and walking down the street, all of a sudden a bar that I wasn't aware there was even a bar in, it always seemed to be closed, and all of a sudden it's open, and it says Anthony's on it, and it looks like a bar, but there's no charging going on, and I walk in and they say, "Look, after you vote, son, come here for a beer. Oh, by the way, here's Meet Anthony." And it was Mr. Anthony Russo, the former mayor of Hoboken. He turns to me and he says, "Oh, I know you. You live on..." And he got our address. He was only off by one digit. Now, there is some organization politics. This has been going on for years. So if we go back to 1937, we got a fellow named Harry Moore, who's the governor. And Harry Moore, you can see him as a product kind of the Jersey City machine. In fact, he even has a quote in the newspapers when he first wins in 1925 that says, the patronage for me is going to be given to Jersey City. Now, it's never so simple, but that was the goal of that political machine. Harry Moore has the distinction of being governor 3 different times, separated by Republicans who won in each case. And he first starts as governor in 1925. One of the things that had happened when he wins in 1925, Calvin Coolidge had just been reelected as president in 1924. And he's a Republican and Harry Moore's a Democrat. And one of the things that made Republicans kind of shake their fists is that Whitney, the Republican candidate, a guy from Morris County, more in the western kind of Republican, used to be Republican end of the state, wins every single county. New Jersey has 21 counties. He wins 20 of the counties. He wins a plurality in. And yet Moore wins the election because his majority in Hudson County, where Jersey City is so large that it overwhelms. In Hudson County, Moore gets 126,000 votes compared to 59,000 votes, so he wins Hudson County by 67,000. If you take all 20 other counties in New Jersey at this time, this is 1925, Whitney gets 416,000, Moore gets 370,000, Whitney wins the rest of the state, 46,000, but it's not enough, and Moore wins the election by 21,000. And it's exaggerated because it's 1925, and so that difference between rural and urban with immigrant communities in a place like Jersey City is exaggerated. That's going to change over time, but it really comes to be controversial in a future election. He's returned to power in 1937, but the victory then is quickly shadowed by accusations that in Hudson County, they didn't just vote for him, they made the votes up. In Camden's Courier-Post, December 1937, lawyers alleged that election officials had fraudulently manipulated poll books, padding them with the names of people who had died, moved, or never properly registered. In effect, the suit claimed that Haig's organization, Frank Haig, boss of Hudson County, best way to say it, had built phantom armies of voters to secure Moore's victory. Moore was not the kind of guy to go to for a great speech, oratory, and he was seen as an enabler of patronage. And his boss, Frank Haig, he was loyal to a fault. I think the only time they disagreed is at one point Frank Haig wants Moore to run even for a fourth term, and he's finally like, boss, I'm done. To modern ears, patronage sounds automatically corrupt, and it is in a lot of ways. I mean, there's ghost jobs, people that are doing nothing and getting the paycheck. That's coming out of taxpayer rolls, padded payrolls, people making more money than they really should, having 2 or 3 jobs, assignment not on merit for the job, maybe even for some important jobs that you want good workers for. People are just getting the job because of who they know. But there is another side. And in urban cities, you get in a time of the early 20th century, 100 years ago, patronage also means a tangible safety net. Jobs for dock workers, jobs for clerks, for police officers, favors for families that needed help, a ladder for immigrants. Otherwise, they're not going to have an access at all. So, political machines are ruthless in getting loyalty, but also provide some stability. In his 1937 election, Moore faces this challenge, and the challengers start looking at the legal challenge at some of these poll books. These are permanent registration books that record who's actually qualified to vote. Now, reformers are saying the people who are voting and your registration books don't match. Names of people who were dead, who were absent, were just not in this city at the time in order to vote. People unqualified to vote were showing up as having voted. Here's what some of the petitions say. Your petitioner further shows and alleges that as and by reason of aforesaid fraudulent and illegal conduct on the part of the members of the district boards of the election, as hereinbefore mentioned in Schedule A thereto annexed, and as in hereinafter more particularly set off, votes from illegal voters who were not qualified to vote in the election as such district were permitted and determined by comparison of the poll books in said districts with the signatures in permanent registration books of the names of such person. Well, now you've got a problem, because what the petitioners had done is not a complete, full legal study of the entire election of everybody who votes. That needs to be done. What they find are some inconsistencies. And when there is an attempt to do a greater search, what happens is Jersey City says some of these poll books burnt in a fire. Newspapers in late 1937 and 1938 hint that this burning is no accident. And the timing, right as they're going to court, feeds the suspicion. So, Moore, for his part, obviously doesn't give up the office. He doesn't waver. He treats the accusations as noise. A lot of people don't like this. And by the way, it's not just Republicans, though Republicans are going to start to lead the effort. And you're going to see New Jersey as a state. It's really the 1940s where the state has a real reform movement and gets a new constitution. And this is one of the reasons among many. There's other things they need to change about education and things like that. I want to be buried in Hudson County so that I can remain active in politics. Governor Brendan Byrne. A few years ago, a horse named Hudson County finished second in the Kentucky Derby. A veteran Hudson County political reporter explained he was supposed to finish second. Governor Brendan Byrne. I don't understand people from Somerset County. They're rich before they go into politics. So not everybody's happy with this Hudson County burning poll book controversy. And there's reformers in New Jersey, in Trenton, the capital, that are proposing ways to tighten the election administration. They're talking about doing things like combining Jersey City with a nearby city of Newark and having one election district. I'm not sure that would solve the problem, but at that time it seemed that way, to just reduce the amount of offices there might be to give out, or who would determine, just try to take some of Frank Hague's power away. One of the names that you see among these reform proposals is Senator Hamilton Fish Kane. We're watching developments closely and concerned that the Hudson machine is always going to tilt New Jersey's election statewide all the time. The Kane family has a long history in New Jersey. And in fact, Hamilton's grandnephew is going to be Tom Kane.
Politics is always a game of expectations. And you always want to do better than they expected. And they did better than expected.
Tom Kane, if you fast forward to 1981, you've got somewhat of the same controversy. Hudson County's back in the spotlight. The race is between Tom Kane and Jim Florio. It's razor thin. Kane runs a strong campaign. He's actually a politician I have a lot of admiration for. It's during the Reagan administration, the beginning of the Reagan administration. The tax cut package has been put through, but you're getting towards the end of 1981, and some of the popularity, like any president, right, originally in April, particularly after Reagan got shot, it's declining somewhat. James Florio is making a big issue out of this. You also have state issues. Brendan Byrne had just been the governor. We'll talk about him in a bit, known for some of his quotes. But he also created the income tax in New Jersey. And so there's a legacy there that Florio has to, as the Democratic candidate, kind of inherits. Some people like that casinos were started under Brendan Byrne's second term there, and some people don't. So that issue is live. Taxes are high. Job growth is sluggish. Jim Florio is the author of the Superfund law, the environmental law in Washington, and that gives him some bonus in the state. Tom Kane comes from the northern half of the state, a real patrician background. You can take the Kane family, and they go all the way back to colonial days, when the original Kane comes from South Carolina and marries into the Livingston family, a big family in New Jersey. There's a town called Livingston, New Jersey. There's a Kane College, wealthy and important family. But Tom Kane runs on optimism. He says he's going to reform education, fiscal discipline. And so really what you have, all of this is to say that you got a really tight race. In fact, Kane doesn't want to take any part of the state for granted. He starts in Newark, New Jersey, very unusual for a Republican candidate at this time, starts campaigning there. And on Election Day, November 3rd, 1981, something interesting happens, something somewhat rare that bucks a trend in New Jersey that we're going to talk about. Kane, the Republican, wins while there's a Republican in the White House. Because as we're going to discuss, normally, but not always, New Jersey bucks that trend. It doesn't happen in 1981, but it's laser close. 2,000 votes separate Kane and Florio out of millions cast. In fact, there's a crazy candidate running for the Consumer Party, and there's a libertarian candidate, a socialist candidate. And all these guys are going to get more votes between them. They're going to get 18,000 votes, and the margin between Kane and Florio's just 2,000. Everything becomes important, and the first thing they do is impound all the voting machines in Jersey City. So all these years later, Hamilton Fish's grandnephew, later, Jersey City's still an issue. After weeks, there's legal wrangling, and the courts upheld that Tom Kane has won the election. He turned out to be a good governor. I think generally he's a good person, and he's somebody I have continue to have a lot of respect for. Read his book. His book is a good book to read, The Politics of Inclusion.
I think had a Republican candidate been able to run that year on modifying the income tax and changing it in ways that would have made it better and fairer, that he could have won.
And guess what? I don't think there's a secret as to how he got that election to be close in a state where there's a lot of Democrats. But the race also becomes infamous for another reason. The Republican National Committee in 1981 sponsors a ballot security task force. They send off-duty sheriffs and police officers, some of them are armed, to patrol polling places, especially in the cities of New Jersey, Newark, Camden, Trenton. And Democrats charge this as intimidation, aimed at minority voters. It doesn't overturn the election, but there is a court case about it, and the court found that there was enough evidence that at least it could intimidate voters, that the RNC is now bound by a federal consent decree that limited its ability to do such operations. Every couple of years, the RNC would sue to get out of that. And in 2018, because the judge had put a 35-year limitation on this consent decree, it simply expires. And so this decree no longer exists. There were hundreds of workers in these various cities. The Republicans argue, wait, we're not allowed to do it, but Democrats are. Democrats would argue back, yeah, you get your votes from suburbs, and there's no way Democrats are going to be in every single suburbs, but in a few cities, you can kind of get some people control the voting places. And this is just a debate that goes on, but it was a big part of New Jersey in 1981. So I'll get into it then, and I'll tell a little story as well, a really strange story about the other side of New Jersey nobody talks about, and that's South Jersey. Maybe my old buddy Bob Crawford is listening. Bob actually started a new podcast called American History Hotline. So give it a check out, all right? And Bob and I are alumni of Stockton College down in South Jersey. We're going to talk about that. But let me get to the interesting part, which might be interesting to people who aren't from New Jersey as well. Go back 100 years. New Jersey's having a gubernatorial election right now. Republicans in the White House. Democrat has the governorship. So if you go back 100 years, we have that Harry Moore, who was a Democrat, defeated the Republican, while Calvin Coolidge was in the White House. And you have several elections where Harry Moore will win when Herbert Hoover's in the White House. Harold Hoffman will win New Jersey back right after FDR wins in the White House. Charles Edison, relative to the famous inventor, will be governor for a quick term. Walter Edge, a Republican, will get into the White House while FDR is in. And Alfred Driscoll, the Republican, we'll talk about him in a second, will get in when Democrat Harry Truman is in the White House. He'll be reelected while Truman's still in the White House. When Eisenhower's elected in 1952, in the 1953 gubernatorial election, Robert Maynard. When Nixon wins his big landslide in 1972, the next term, Brendan Byrne, who we'll also talk about, is going to be elected. Christine Todd Whitman during Clinton, Jim McGreevey during George W. Bush, Chris Christie during Obama, Phil Murphy first wins during Trump. He's the current governor. You have many examples of New Jersey bucking that national trend. Not always, however. You have Richard Hughes, very popular guy in New Jersey, though older. He was a congressman after he was governor for a while. He gets elected while Kennedy's elected, and they're both Democrats. So sometimes it bucks the trend. Now, what are the numbers? About 67% of the time, the party opposite the White House wins the New Jersey election. 33% of the time, the same party who has the White House wins the New Jersey election. If you confine the range to just since 1980, and that's just 11 elections, it's even higher. 73% of the time, New Jersey will send to the governor's office whoever, from the party that is the opposite in the White House. Why does it happen? I don't know. Maybe we're just contrarian. But if you've ever driven in New Jersey on the Garden State Parkway north, and as you rise the long span across the Raritan River between the Jersey Shore and New York City, traffic humming beside you by the Chesapeake rest stop, now called the Bon Jovi rest stop, a sign will tell you that this is the Driscoll Bridge. And you just kind of have this experience of looking up at the sky as you're going up. I was in my V4 Honda Civic Coupe, chugging along, getting up that hill. And you might wonder, certainly I did, because I'm your history and politics podcaster, who the heck is Driscoll? And Driscoll is Alfred E. Driscoll, governor from 1947 to 1954. He was a South Jersey governor. Now, that's pretty rare. So New Jersey does have several counties that are considered South Jersey. There's a lot of bickering and arguments over North, Central, and South. We don't have time to get into all those sort of things, but the counties that border the Philadelphia area and Delaware, those are more considered the South Jersey counties. Driscoll's from Haddonfield. He was a suburban reformer who believed in efficiency, modernization. He's opposed to this Frank Hague machine politics of New Jersey. And Driscoll comes to power just as New Jersey adopts its 1947 Constitution. This gives the governor far greater authority than the old fractured system. Now, he's coming into power as a Republican when Truman the Democrat's in the White House. He's making full use of his new powers. While earlier governors often had to trade favors and live with fragmented bureaus, Driscoll reorganized state government, professionalized the civil service, tried to slim down on this patronage culture where you could have a governor openly saying, I'm going to give the patronage of the state to a particular city and still politically, win elections 3 times. Today's show is brought to you by Vanguard. To all of the financial advisors listening, let's talk bonds for a minute. Capturing value in fixed income is not easy. Bond markets are massive, murky, and let's be real, lots of firms throw a couple of flashy funds your way and call it a day. But not Vanguard. Vanguard bonds are institutional quality. Institutional quality isn't a tagline. It's a commitment to your clients. It means top-grade products across the board. The lineup includes over 80 bond funds, actively managed by a 200-person global squad of sector specialists, analysts, and traders. So if you're looking to give your clients consistent results year in and year out, go see the record for yourself at Vanguard.com/audio. That's Vanguard.com/AUDIO. All investing is subject to risk. Vanguard Marketing Corporation, distributor. His biggest mark is on the road you're traveling on when you're on the Garden State Parkway. He pushes hard for it, both the Turnpike and the Garden State Parkway. And it takes a while to build that parkway, but he pushes for it. Driscoll was more than a highway builder. He advanced civil rights legislation. He signed into law one of the earliest state bans on racial discrimination in public accommodations, years before the federal Civil Rights Act. He serves as a reformer and modernizer. Now, Frank Hague doesn't like Driscoll very much, and he had for years ruled Hudson County with an iron fist. He amassed a personal fortune. Critics say he lives like a prince on a cop's pay. He turns the public payroll into a revenue stream. City employees kick back a portion of the wages to the machine. It's something that the city still can't shake, even with a mayor that many people consider a reform mayor. And what's already happening in the 40s is he's losing power. And the kind of power that he had, and during the 30s, say, is starting to loosen a bit as people get more prosperous. They're moving to suburbs. The state isn't under his control as much anymore. Driscoll's there. And there's a new mayor, Kenny, who opposes Hague's control of Jersey City. So now, instead of Frank Hague having total control of Jersey City, by the time you're getting to 1949, it's split. Hague still has some people loyal to him, but this new reform group and Kenny, with the backing of labor organizations, are also powerful. So they're split. What Hague cannot do in the next gubernatorial election in order to beat Alfred Driscoll in his re-election is put in some other crony from Jersey City. First of all, he doesn't control Jersey City as much anymore. So that kind of like city employee or councilman or local assemblyman, may not be available to him. Also, it's just not going to work anymore. People are kind of seeing through this play. So Frank Hague does something different. He finds the most far away point from Jersey City he can, and that's Cumberland County on the border of Delaware, the southernmost part of the state. To this day, the least populated county in New Jersey is Cumberland County, and he finds a man named Elmer Ween. He's a poultry farmer. He's also a state senator. He had been a congressman. He has his own radio show. He's got a lot of things going on, very well known in his county of Cumberland. The people who are most mad now is the new reform mayor of Jersey City, and the new machine in Jersey City, which some people say this is just a different organization under a different name. But the anti-Hague machine, they're mad. They want a guy from Newark named Brady. They appeal to the Democratic chairman of the state. He says, no go. We're going with Hague's guy, Ween. Everybody get on board. Ween has a really funny way of campaigning. He's got these posters that say it looks like Ween. I mean, he's got a little folksy image. And it's weird because this is very rare for New Jersey elections, that you have two people running against each other who have nothing to do with the big city parts of New Jersey, with the northern part of New Jersey. They're both from South Jersey running against each other. So Ween tries this kind of like folksy angle. Here's from a New Jersey newspaper. Ode man Elmer and his chillin'. Here we are living in a fool's paradise. The sweet singers of Bergen. D. Or D flat. Joke about Democrats. This week ground out 23 feet, 172 succulent lines of song in praise of Elmer Ween, the Democratic candidate for governor. We'll change the scene with Elmer Ween. Words by Walter S. Hill. Get out the vote for Elmer from Bergen to Cape May. Elmer will be with us in Trenton. There'll be no gloom election day. There'll be double jingle. On election day we'll mingle. We'll change the scene with Elmer Ween. On election day. And they're running around Bergen County shouting this song, apparently, or singing it in various homes. Perhaps we can come back to this work in a moment. They tell us that when it is performed, people throw up their hats, and we can well believe it. Next is a poem by Mr. Patrick Tedesco, a Democratic candidate for the General Assembly. It bears the vaguely evocative title, Let's Change the Scene with Elmer Ween. It consists of 10 quatrains, a 4-foot iambic, and hence is comparable with Tennyson's In Memoriam, if you beat out the rhythm on a bass drum. And there's just kind of a lot of this with Ween. He's playing off who he is, and it looks like Ween posters, meaning like it looks like, hey, he's winning the election. And so Republicans, though, are taking his posters that say it looks like Ween with a picture of him and pasting, but it's really Haig, showing his connection with the inner city political boss. Despite all this, it does actually become a very close race. One of the things that Ween really picks up on is the issue of bingo. The state has banned it, but Ween, emphasizing that Democrats at this time have a large Catholic constituency, completely without any evidence, he says, Governor Driscoll is letting people have bingo games now during the election, but as soon as it's over, he's going to start cracking down on it again. Now, critics, on the other hand, are going to say Ween's trying to make religion an issue, and he shouldn't. He pushes for more money for teachers, slams the governor for not giving a $2,500 pay level that Driscoll had promised. Ween's big issue, too, he's going to abolish the state's cigarette tax. But this is a major source of education funding. So Driscoll and their campaign turns to Ween and says, well, if you take out this cigarette tax, how are you going to fund education? It's a pretty close election. What's going to happen is Driscoll's going to win that 51.5% to 47%. It's another example of Republican winning where Democrats in the White House. So New Jersey being that contrarian self, that it is about 67% of the time. But again, not always. And, strange things can happen. There was a poll that showed 96% of the people knew who I was, and 4% thought I was doing a good job. Governor Brendan Byrne. So you get Brendan Byrne. He wins in 73 in the wake of Nixon having won in 1972, fulfilling that contrarian promise. When he runs for re-election, these New Jersey's trend would indicate that he might be in trouble because it's 1977 and Carter's president at that point. He's also in trouble because he's best remembered for his decision to break a campaign promise and push through New Jersey's first state income tax. It's deeply unpopular. His approval rating is at 17%, according to New Jersey Almanac. Critics dub him one-term Byrne. It doesn't look good. I mean, Byrne has to fight off two strong Democrats in a primary where the Republicans have a little bit of a primary, but they get this guy, Raymond Bateman, who's a state senator. And basically the issue he's very focused on is if you elect me, I'm going to get rid of the income tax that Governor Byrne put in. And so what do you do? I mean, he's down. Brendan Byrne goes on the offensive. He decides to just sign a bill every other day or something like it, to use the power of the incumbency that he has. He absolutely stands by his tax, and he challenges his opponent to 9 debates. Let's talk a lot about this. You want to get rid of it? Let's talk about what you do. If I don't have this, I'll have to reinstate business taxes. I'll have to decrease state education. I'll have to decrease aid that goes to offset property taxes and homestead rebates. Anyone from New Jersey, New York, a lot of the Northeast states, you'll know that we have property taxes here that, you could argue which is worse, and a lot of people say property taxes are worse. This is part of what's at play here. Bateman tries to coast, but Brendan Byrne starts to play this underdog game where he keeps calling Bateman out like, you're not announcing any proposals. You're just, talking about generalities and stuff like that. He forces Bateman to actually then come out with an 11-point proposal. Freeze on hiring, budget transfers, tightening of welfare payments, and an increase of 1 cent on the dollar on the 5% sales tax. Then he says he'll cut other things, so I only have to replace some amount of your new income tax. Newspapers go crazy. This is terrible. It's unworkable. Byrne's now attacking him. And you now kind of have, instead of just having everybody against Byrne, Byrne has changed the election into me and the alternative. One of the things that really hurts Bateman is that when a reporter asks, okay, you're going to get rid of the income tax, would you ever reimpose it? And Bateman, I guess being honest, says, well, I can't say I would never do that. He gets those headlines. And as these debates go on, he just can't stand up to Byrne. And in one of the debates, he's forced to admit that there would be tremendous problems if his plan didn't lead to an economic boost. And there's this kind of neat moment where both Jimmy Carter and Gerald Ford are in the state of New Jersey, campaigning for their candidates. And the dynamic that we've been talking about here, where New Jersey usually votes off year, is exactly the same thing that they're counting on. So for Carter, this is a test. This in the Virginia election is a test of how his administration is, kind of a referendum on him. And for Gerald Ford, it's also a bit of a referendum because he's thinking about getting in 1980 in the presidential race, and they want to see how powerful his endorsement is. He speaks, endorses Bateman, and then he says, I think Raymond Bateman is going to make a great governor of Michigan. And it's just one of those Fordisms, and gets some, it's almost like, thank you, Mr. Ford, for the help. They did do the 9 debates, and they do 2 joint other appearances. The debates, the more the debates go, they get more acrimonious. Byrne attacks. And, in some cases, Bateman just wasn't up for this election. And Byrne is kind of the underdog fighting. And because he already has a negative image, he just leans into that. And he calls Bateman a liar. He calls him a hypocrite. They kind of get more angry as they go on, and Bateman won't go to his level and won't respond. One thing that happens that's highly unusual in 1978 campaign is that Brendan Byrne actually proposes the decriminalization, not legalization, but decriminalization of marijuana, and Bateman opposes it. Governor Byrne said, studies made in states which had decriminalized marijuana showed that there was no increased use of the drug. There was considerable savings of law enforcement officials by the simple procedure of treating conviction for the use of marijuana as a violation, as we would do to a disorderly person, the governor said. I would sign a law approved by the legislature consistent with that. Bateman says, I have not yet been convinced, and that marijuana does not lead a user to other drugs. Until I am, I cannot be involved in that process. So a very frontier kind of concept in New Jersey. I actually had the rare privilege many years ago of meeting Brendan Byrne. He never stopped coming to various conventions. He was always on New Jersey Network. He would debate with former Governor Tom Kean quite a bit. He just recently passed away. One of the quotes that he has from this 1978 election is, I knew I'd get reelected when people started waving at me, using all 5 fingers. And so there you go, a little bit of New Jersey gubernatorial history. It is true, and a Democrat could possibly take some comfort that usually New Jersey votes against the White House. But here's the trouble with all of those trends. It's just a trend. And a 33% chance is still a chance. We've seen 2 examples of hard worker campaigns who have bucked that trend in Tom Kean and Brendan Byrne. I never got to meet Tom Kean, but I like him. And I did meet and like Brendan Byrne. I want to thank you for listening. Those of you who wish to stay and hear more Brendan Byrne quotes, please stay. At my age, before I buy anything in the supermarket, I look at the expiration dates on the products. Milk is usually a safe bet. One of the cardinal rules of New Jersey politics is there's no such thing as a private conversation. Somewhere along the line, you're going to be taped by someone wearing a wire. This is why so many political meetings start with a big bear hug, a New Jersey pat-down among friends. You know, I look out this window at the Delaware River, and I figured if I walked across the water, the headlines would say the next day, "Byrne can't swim." During a cabinet meeting in his last year in office, the governor remarked that several members of the New Jersey cabinet were reportedly considering becoming a candidate to succeed him in the 1981 gubernatorial election, commenting, "Gee, I must have made it look so easy." William Franklin, the illegitimate son of Benjamin Franklin, was the last royal governor of the colony of New Jersey. Some people think he was only the first in a long line of bastards to hold this office. I think I'll leave it there. Here's what I like about our sponsor, All the Hacks Podcast. You hear all these business podcasts, and they're all telling you to do things. Start a business, buy a home, write this off, write that off. All the Hacks is a podcast that acknowledges that things are kind of expensive right now. So All the Hacks focuses on tips and tactics to upgrade your life, your money, your travel, while spending less. It's about hacks, money. There's an episode about what each generation gets right and wrong with Ben Carlson, no relation. Some of us in Gen Z or boomers can learn from millennials and Gen Z. It doesn't just go one way. I like his bonus episode about earning points on your mortgage or cards that have up to 4% bonus programs. All great. Search for All the Hacks. That's All the Hacks in your podcast app. Hit follow and start upgrading your life today.